Hi, welcome to Maker's Bar. This is Akshata. Today we have Coert Duplessis, who's the CEO of MaxMine and co-founder of Data Alchemist. I'm really excited to learn about his journey and his story and how he got started. So welcome, Coert.
Akshata, amazing and great to be at Maker's Bar. I love the energetic tune, and I love the let's make a million more leaders in the world, because we definitely need them. So I'm very
Yes,
excited to be here.
same here. I'm very excited to have you as well and actually learn about your journey. So let's get into the questions. So tell me a little bit about your early career and how you got to doing what you're doing.
Right. I think, you never get where you are by yourself. There's always amazing people along the way that just, does something to you, and it finds some energy that it awakens and just sparks you. And I've had teachers that were amazing. I've had a mum that was always entrepreneurial. And so the thing that really kicked me off was growing up in a remote farm. You said just before we started, you said you have a lot of followers in India as well. Like, I was like in a remote village of India equivalent in South Africa, and there was no one to talk about technology and all those cool things you could see on the TV. And my mum bought a computer, a Commodore VIC-20, which Elon Musk also learned to program on. And you plugged it into a TV with a cassette recorder. And I spoke Afrikaans, so I had to learn English to learn how to program, so I could play my games and the annoying music that you make on those old school computers. And so that kind of kicked it off. And then I had this amazing teacher, and I said, I was like grade 1 or 2, and I'm like, why are we learning how to write? We're all going to have computers on our desk. This was 80s. And she laughed so loud. To her credit, she brought me a typewriter. And I was the only kid in the whole school that had a typewriter, because I didn't want to write. And what that inspired in me, was that if you ask the universe or people for things, amazing things happen, especially if you're keen about it. And so what that set off a career in technology. And also, because farming was very difficult, I never wanted to be caught out like I saw my father was with finances and banks and be at the mercy of things. So I studied information systems, I studied commerce or chartered accountancy, and I studied law. And so I went in all 3 directions, and I was very lucky that Deloitte allowed me to come and work for them and travel at the same time. So I said to them, I'll work for you, but I'm going to go to Australia and I'm going to do a round the world trip. Are you okay with that? And they're like, that's unusual, but we'll do it. And so I had an amazing career, maybe 17 years with Deloitte, that started off doing IT and accounting, and mostly like the internet was just starting. And it ended up as senior partner at Deloitte when I was barely 30 in Western Australia, setting up the advanced practice. And so we did some really early neural nets. We predicted which people get hurt next on industrial sites. That tech was so good, it was almost too effective. And just one of my failures, I'm sure you'll ask me later about it, but one of my failures was, when you know it's getting hurt next, you introduce liability for the board. And we weren't sure enough that they could definitely take action. So that product didn't take off. No, it has a lot of potential today. And we use that to predict which students aren't going to come back to university next semester, so we could call them early. And so we did some really amazing stuff. Worked for a private business, the world's largest mining company in the world, ran their digital and then data strategy globally, called BHP. And then my friends who founded MaxMine asked me to come and help them raise capital and scale the company. And we 3x that company in 2 years after we raised about 10 million. And, we co-founded Data Alchemists, my brother-in-law, and we're busy working on some really amazing tech.
Wow. I have to say, consultants are some of the smartest people I've met. I'm a former consultant myself, and we can pick up anything and make something out of it. So how old were you when you said like computers are going to be the next thing? And I'm not trying to find your age, but I'm just curious. Like, you must have been a visionary back then.
I was probably barely 8.
Barely 8. Wow. So to say that at 8, that shows something. That shows that you probably were a visionary at that age. So I say I want to be a scientist.
But maybe a bit overexcited as well, like thinking the future is going to come a lot sooner than what it did. But yes, I think
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
not far,
yeah.
coming off the whole moon missions and space missions in the mid '80s. A lot was happening. So
That's amazing. That's pretty cool. I mean, nobody would have said that. So a kid saying that at that time would have. I think it's very strange and different, and at the same time, it shows where you are now. So
yeah, I think to take that thought a bit further is like how one or two people can have a absolutely pivotal impact on your career and where you're going.
yeah,
Because if the teachers shouted at me and said, "Don't be stupid, you're going to go and learn how to do these squiggly patterns," and I still write horrendously, right? My handwriting is bad. It may have crushed part of that dream. There's this movie with Gwyneth Paltrow called Sliding Doors, where in one scenario she gets into the train because she runs for it, and another
yeah,
scenario where the door closes and she waits for the next train. And life's a
yeah,
bit like that. And each of us, you and me,
yeah,
maybe someone listening to this podcast, can pick up
yeah.
something, and maybe that's another leader out there because they just got one thing that worked for them.
Yes, yes. And strangest thing I would say, like I've had in my life, like people give me one sentence advice, and that has gone a long way for me. Like literally. Like they've just given me one sentence, it's changed my life.
The
So this is
universe provided the information you needed at the right time.
yes, exactly. So it changes, and you look back and it's like, oh, that was just a small thing that was a pivotal point in my life, and it just changed completely. So tell me, what does your companies do and what their main product lines are? So I
Yep.
want to understand that a little bit, or our viewers want to understand that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I'll talk mostly about MaxMine here because the other product isn't in the market yet. So,
Yeah.
MaxMine is an amazing virtually integrated um, technology business, but it
Mhm.
has a lot of different elements. We aspire to a lot of what SpaceX and Tesla has done. And so, if
Mhm.
you kind of live in Silicon Valley, you're mostly in the world of bits. We are very much in the world of bits and atoms. And
Mhm.
so atoms makes life real, and it means you can see your work every day. It also
Yeah.
makes life hard because the rate you can scale. So if
Mhm.
you're thinking about metals mining, and I know not everyone's very keen on mining because of the damage it
Yeah.
does to the planet.
Yeah.
Yet the the backstory here is that there is no net zero without twice as much copper in the next 20 to 30 years than what
Yeah.
humanity's mined ever. So from the pyramids, through the
Yeah.
Victorian age, through the dot-com boom, through the
Yeah.
GFC, through the mining boom of the last few years, you add up all of the copper we've mined in that period, we need twice that amount in the next 20 to 30 years to build the infrastructure to
Uh-huh.
do the transition to an electrically powered from hydrocarbon economy. And those numbers are, even if they are wrong by quite a bit, the amount we need is huge. And mining
Mhm.
companies have done investments to find
Mhm.
more copper, nickel, especially lithium,
Mhm.
everyone knows about, but the copper and nickel are the really big things, neodymium magnets and so on. So as much as the mining industry um, is a difficult space to play in, my personal view when I joined BHP, the world's largest miner, is like, I can be negative about this, or I can go help these guys lift the table because
Mhm.
we need to solve this problem. And this, if we bring the technology in, there's so much more we can do. If we can bring the
Mhm.
thinking, Silicon Valley level thinking and exponential level thinking, especially, you go from scarcity to abundance thinking. Okay, so with that caveat, what MaxMind does is it helps mines improve their operational efficiency, and it helps
Mhm.
their operators of machines think
Mhm.
really huge machines. So the
Mhm.
payload on these things are 200 or 300 tons, metric
Mhm.
tons. That's how much you can load on the back. You can put a few buses on the back. The people
Yeah.
who operate these machines are very important to the efficiency. So what MaxMind does is, at its heart, it's a data company. And
Mhm.
it strings together four components: an edge component, IoT, that intercepts data independent of the OEMs. All the OEMs,
Mhm.
the original equipment manufacturers of a Caterpillar truck, Komatsu truck, they've built many walled gardens around their technology. We
Mhm.
reverse coded them so we can get the information. We
Mhm.
then built, we've got about 8 million hours by December, probably at least December now. So probably 9. We'll be approaching 10 million very soon, operating hours across all different kinds of equipment at very high resolution. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the data cube we've built, we've got a lot of AI, a lot of annealing algorithms that make the data and compare it to each other better. The data coming off machines is pure, but pretty messy. And then we put it into various user interfaces, just a hub for the people to access. And you said you're from a consulting background. The industries that are lagging in digital transformation, we have
Yeah.
humans really good at improvement and go, what's your objective? And then they
Yeah.
hardwire the technology tools we've built into the strategic opportunities, as
Yeah.
well as revisit every quarter. And the last thing we have is we have an on-call analytics team, because most of these guys, analytics teams, are too busy. So very low friction. You pick up the phone, you go through to level 3 support immediately. They have access to all of our data, and they can answer
Mm.
about 80% of the questions within 24 hours. So
Got
MaxMine
it.
is very integrated across all the way from edge, data, software, and then integration.
That's amazing. And what about Data Alchemist? What does that do?
So Data Alchemist was founded in 2011 when
Mhm.
I realized that big data and data wasn't very well understood. And
Yeah.
so a bit like with Maker's Bar, we built a community around it. And we
Yeah.
started pushing very hard for community. And
Yeah.
as my career has transitioned, it's built a community, and then you kind of get really busy building a company.
Yeah.
And so it's transitioned into latest as we did a little bit of advisory. But right now we are
Yeah.
working on a very exciting product, which is all about making employee data accessible within organizations, removing
Uh-huh.
all of the friction around confidentiality and privacy, and giving employees full control over their data. And so
Mm.
that is a very complex process,
Yeah.
but you can empower the data of employees within organizations. You can unlock a lot of learning potential, growth potential, and efficiencies for the business.
That's pretty cool. Actually, I am quite inspired by Data Alchemist, I have to say personally as well, because I've seen the brand around for a long time now, and you've done a pretty good job at it. So, so tell me, like as you built, you've been a partner at a Big Four. So as you built and you've had a long career, right? You even that is being a partner was also like owning a P&L and actually running a business. It's not something which is not running a business or something like that.
Sure.
So, so what are like the challenges that you faced over the years, and what would you say was your toughest challenge, and how did you kind of overcome it?
Mm.
Um,
So I think there's a very famous Steve Jobs interview, and I don't know if it's at Berkeley or MIT, where he asks
yeah,
people what to do, and the one person says he's a consultant, and he kind of goes after the person. So I think
yeah,
consulting teaches you a lot.
yeah,
The drawback of consulting, I believe, and this is my personal view, it's an incredible career. It pays very well if you get to
yeah,
the high levels.
yeah,
When you're junior levels, it pays very well in learning, and that should
yeah,
not be underestimated. Even though I built a business and a practice in establishing the first analytics business in
yeah,
the area that I'm in, it did really well. It's not quite the same as day in day out building a customer product, because every now and then you have blue sky what you sell. And I do
yeah,
think if you're kind of like thinking about consulting, yes, think about learning. And if you think about
yeah,
building a company, then think about building something that you can see and feel and grow. And so those are my
yeah,
two different things.
yeah,
Um, you want to talk about failures? I think it's probably worthwhile talking about the safety product that we built. That was a real product. So unlike
yeah.
normal consultants, we actually build product and productized products within Deloitte, and we were empowered to do them. And
Mm-hmm.
then maybe I can talk a little bit about the IoT failure, and
Yeah,
that's much closer to your audience, I think.
yeah,
So
yeah,
when we built this safety product that predicted who gets hurt next, it was
yeah,
like we really wanted to stop people getting hurt. Industrial accidents destroy
yeah,
families and communities, and it happens a lot more than what people know. Someone's
yeah,
leg gets pinned, their life changes. Someone
yeah,
gets crushed, their family is different, and that impacts all of their co-workers. So we
yeah,
did a very much, you can predict what from Amazon back there, what someone's going to buy next. We should be able to predict who's going to get hurt next. And we got very close. We got 70% confidence levels, which is pretty insane. And we
yeah.
could profile heuristics around it. What we
Mm-hmm.
didn't assess for someone thinking about a business is we had lots of demand for the product. It was very good to sell, in saying like, What if we could
Yeah.
tell you it's going to get that next? People will get insanely excited about it. What we
Yeah.
didn't understand is like, what are the downsides of having this information? And the
Hmm.
downside is when you start revealing risk, if you're wrong and nothing happens, there's no problem. But
Yeah.
if you're right and the CEO or the board of this organization didn't act on what they should have known or could have
Yeah.
known, you
Yeah.
introduce all of these problems for them. And so
Yeah.
the way some of these liability laws work means that it's better for people not to know. I know it's not a popular opinion, but that's the reality. They don't want to go to
Wow.
jail because
Yeah.
they had to decide if the 70% confidence meant that they should have given people a new job or not. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
my advice from that failure was, okay, I should really understand what the information downside could be when you know these things. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so the other one was maybe at MaxMine, it's a better one. I'm very passionate about IoT. I've always thought where bits and atoms meet is where there's a lot of value to be extracted.
Yeah.
All the owners built all these walled gardens. They've built them so badly that even they can't get their own data out. So we're
Hmm.
one of the few companies who can give you all versions of hardware, machines, all different OEMs, and give you the data in a standardized format. Uh, but our tech platform was getting a bit long in the tooth, and it was expensive. It was a third of the price of the OEMs, but we thought we could get it to at least a fifth or
Okay.
even less. So I wanted to half the price of that we were paying. And we set out an architecture where I had some additional capabilities in, and we set them to run.
Hmm.
And we started checking some of the milestones off that we were hoping the team would get to. I mean, progress was made every month. And what
Yes.
it turned out when one of the guys went on leave and we had to step in, as always happens, like it's very good to send your most promising staff on leave. Make sure they take leave. Because when someone else has to step in, they all always have at some point in time a WTF moment because they ask different questions.
Yeah.
If it should have not pursue this emerging leader, make sure you take leave because someone else can look at things that you may not see. Anyway, so what happened when this other person stepped in was like, Coert, I don't think what I'm hearing in the parallel streams is making sense. And we did a deep dive. And
Yeah.
after 6 months of development on a 12-month roadmap,
Yeah.
we were about to go to production. And what we had built was essentially a paperweight because one of the
Uh-huh.
fundamental uncertainties failed. Technically, we're trying to get power over Ethernet to work in a mobile environment, which is
Uh-huh.
quite novel. So we had
Yeah.
less cables. Cables are quite a problem. And
Yeah.
when we started looking at how installation would work and how one of the chips would work, there was a
Yeah.
fundamental failure. And so we essentially built a paperweight.
Hmm.
So what do you do when that kind of failure happens? You're 6 months in, you're quite a bit of capital down, and we're still a
Yeah.
scale up. Capital is scarce. We hired 2 additional resources to
Yeah.
build this platform. The
Yeah.
first thing you do, all that we did, was to say to the team, you did the best you can.
Yeah.
You know, let's do the retro on what's happened here. Let's
Yeah.
figure out what was missing.
Yeah.
And the team was very surprised that there were no scalps being wanted. There was no chasing of who did anything wrong. What
Hmm.
was important for us was right.
Hmm.
It's probably a leadership failure somewhere, and it goes up. It's probably in a way. Maybe I was too aggressive with what timelines we could hit. Maybe whatever it was. And we said that's not the issue. The issue is how do we get this project back on track? And
Hmm.
so to have that conversation was really powerful. So we re-architected everything,
Hmm.
and we started not from scratch because you had a lot of knowledge, but we started rebuilding it and we changed the capabilities we needed. We realized probably we shouldn't be developing some components of hardware ourselves.
Yeah.
And we also promoted one or two of the people in the team that had really good insight, but didn't think that they had a voice. And so that
Yeah.
failure, which cost us 6 months, became defining that the team knew that they were back
Yeah.
and the team knew that they had to prove something. So I think about it was definitely Elon time on this project for sure, but another 9 months later, we shipped the first version of it. And then
Yeah.
as we kind of installing it and realizing there's some improvements to make, all of those failures that we had back in June 22, when those
Hmm.
failures happened, have now become innovation compost for the new product.
That's amazing. That's a great story, actually. Yeah, I would
And
say.
so the whole thing was to breathe and make the team feel supported.
That's amazing. So what I thought was very interesting was when you said like how the CEO should not know in the industry because it's liability. You know, you're making a decision. If you made a decision, like recently, I don't know if you're following news. There was in San Francisco, there's a company name as Cruise, where they had an accident, and you know,
Yep.
obviously,
I
you don't know
followed
what.
all of that. That was very unfortunate for all automation.
Yeah, yeah, it's very unfortunate. And it was interesting, the CEO resigned. I mean, if I were him, I would do the same, probably.
We took a little
And
while, but yes.
yeah, yeah, true. So I think people don't because probably it's interesting that your background is also very interesting because you were at the cross section of technology, law. You understand all these spaces, and a lot of people, a lot of leaders are not. I mean, there's some leaders which are homegrown, but a lot of leaders don't understand this cross section really well. And especially understanding law as a leader, I feel is very important because you can make better decisions, kind of a thing. So I love that story, and I thought that was my biggest learning, and hopefully, you know, who was listening, they would understand that as well, because the biggest cross section is when you understand law. That's kind of very important. So tell me. What are the, I mean, you talked about safety and everything. What are the key values that, you know, like your company kind of represents, and how do you ensure like they are kind of held, you know, and you've had multiple businesses over the years.
Mm.
But just as a leader, you know, this is kind of very important. I feel people don't think about it enough, ordinary average people, but I feel like a company always needs to have certain values and you need to hold to that. So how do you do that?
Yeah, no, this is an essential question.
Yeah,
Um, the how you do things, there's a million ways.
yeah,
Tony Robbins has got this very famous saying. It's like, if you know the why and the what, the how will take care of itself.
yeah,
Yet most people, when you say you want to do something, they'll say, how are you going to do it? You know,
yeah.
for example, me operating between San Francisco and Perth, and a lot of people are like, how are you going to do it? I'm like, no, it's the wrong question. The right question is why and what are you going to do? And the how
Mm-hmm,
is a million. So the values. So first of all, let's start with the purpose. The purpose of MaxMine, and everyone working there really believes this, uh, is to accelerate the sustainability of our scarce resources.
mm-hmm,
And really important because there's only so much stuff to dig up and we can't waste it. But there's only
mm-hmm,
so much time before we're going to pass the 2-degree mark, which seems to is going to happen now. And there's only
mm-hmm.
so many humans who can try and protect, help, and help them have their best day at work. So those are the resources that are scarce: time, humans,
Yeah.
uh, and the resources that actually get mined. And so
Mm-hmm,
around those things, everyone at MaxMine is very committed to net zero, very committed to sustainability, something we live every day. I didn't
mm-hmm,
say this earlier, but the efficiency process we have will also reduce carbon emissions 5 to 20% today.
mm-hmm,
Not any new
mm-hmm,
technology what today. The
mm-hmm,
values in MaxMine therefore reflect that. So
mm-hmm,
questions we ask ourselves is customer impact. Like, is this going to have an impact on the customer? Everything we
mm-hmm.
do. We build this IoT. Will it make it better for the customer?
Yeah, yeah.
Long-term focus. The beauty about not being listed is that
Mm-hmm,
when that IoT project fail or something else doesn't work, we can trade off. I
mm-hmm,
fired one of my clients that didn't have the right ethical values,
mm-hmm,
and whilst we're looking for growth, the long-term value, what the long-term road wasn't there. And yet some of our customers have been with us since the beginning. And so we
mm-hmm,
really strongly long-term value. We have a value we introduced called finishing. Um,
mm-hmm.
this value is about the job isn't done till it's done.
Yeah,
It's probably one of our trickiest values because how do you define done? And I don't want to
yeah.
get into defining done. There's books on it. So we started talking about, is this finished? When is it finished? What does finishing look like? And finishing can sometimes be earlier too,
Yeah,
right? Um, we have a value of having fun. The team plays soccer. I play with them every now and then when I'm there, and yeah,
yeah,
they kick my butt. I'm not so good, but you know, we have there's always a bit of fun. There's a few people that organize things. The inductions are fun, and so we
yeah,
recognize that fun's very important. Probably one of my
yeah.
we have a value of excellence, which I think most organizations have. The
Yeah.
last value that I'll mention is the one that is very deep and personal to me, and it's called Ubuntu. And because
Yeah.
MaxMine has founders in Africa and founders in Australia, Ubuntu is an African word. It was
Hmm.
also Mandela's favorite word.
Hmm.
And the translation is, I am because we are.
Hmm.
And so,
Okay.
for me, that's the humility thing. We only exist because of our customers. We only
Yeah.
exist because people that work for us to make this happen. We only
Yeah.
exist because our investors enabled us to scale.
Yeah.
It's it's humility, and it also gives us purpose.
Yeah. I hear you. So I think one, this is a very common trait amongst entrepreneurs. And I think as like I look back and I think about myself, I would say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I was not this humble. And now I think my humility is is like off the charts at this point. Because then you realize you're just living the moments and then you're just doing this, right? And I think that is something that I look for when I look at entrepreneurs very closely, because I think that's a very important quality. Entrepreneurs, business leaders, or anybody, for that matter, uh,
Mm.
humility is very important. If you don't have it, I think it's very difficult to kind of survive
Yeah,
all your ups and downs. Yeah.
yeah, and
So
you don't see when the universe is trying to help you. I
yeah,
think on that,
yeah,
I think people sometimes confuse branding and external marketing. Like Maker's Bar, is a
yeah,
brand, and you push them out there. It doesn't
yeah,
mean that you want to be socializing every single day of your life.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. You got that right. I don't want to socialize every single day in my life for sure. I like to be as private as possible. So,
Yeah,
so, so tell me, how do you handle like adversity and doubt? And I say this because I moved here as an immigrant. I've had a lot of adversity and doubts as I've grown through, even though I've had some fantastic like ups and fantastic lows, but I still have a lot of adversity and doubt. So considering you've had a long career, how do you like handle it? And I'm sure you're doing it on a daily basis as you're building, as you're the CEO of this company as well.
yeah. I I think that if you don't have them, there's
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
you're probably not in touch, or you're not pushing yourself to grow, which
Yeah.
means you're still in stasis. Is the worst thing for humans.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say on doubt is, if you
Yeah.
don't have them, something in your human nature is not switched on.
Yeah.
Um, Doubts and that niggly little voice in your head, as
Yeah.
frustrating as it is, tells you that you're alive. And that's the first thing to be grateful for, is that, you know,
Yeah.
uh, is this the voice I should be listening to, or is this the voice of fear? Because they're two different things.
Yeah.
Uh, my philosophy on uncertainty is that every choice is either made out of love or out of fear,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's why I go through them. I think that adversity is there's two kinds of adversity. The one where you bang yourself against a granite wall and you're not ever going to get through, but you are too obsessed to see it. And I
Yeah.
think we've had those
Yeah.
relationships with people, whether
Yeah.
personal or professional,
Yeah.
trying to get something built that couldn't be built.
Yeah.
And then there's adversity where you just have to step through the door.
Yeah.
And it's a lot in your head about how hard walking through that door is. It might take some discipline. It might take you letting go of some other things, so you are free to walk through the door, which is where the fear
Yeah.
comes in. Letting go so you can walk. But those are the two types of adversity. And I don't know any products that have been built that are good outcomes that have been built that I think you would value, that didn't have some form of adversity into them. So my personal message to myself, the quiet moments that I like to have, I think we're the same, is one, is this a choice that I'm making out of fear, or a
Yeah.
choice out of love for the people I work with, or love for the people I want to do a service to?
Yeah.
Um, is this fear about what I need to let go, or fear of what I may
Yeah.
lose?
Yeah.
When you change roles, you often fear about your loss of identity.
Yeah.
A lot of people that have a paid job, they want to do a startup. Their biggest thing is like, what do people tell you? Now, it's not so
Yeah.
prevalent in San Francisco, but in India and in Australia and those places, losing
Yeah.
your work identity is big. So, and then the other thing about adversity is I always kind of have a forward-looking view. I'm like, if I didn't have this suffering now, I wouldn't appreciate it when it's so amazing. I like, I showed you the weather out here. I'm seeing this beautiful air, and if I didn't know what winter looked like, I wouldn't appreciate just how gorgeous today is.
Yeah, I love it. I love your outlook towards life. And it's interesting you talked about making decisions with fear. And that is something that I have been trying to get rid of for this entire 2023. I don't want to make decisions using fear as much as possible. It is very hard to do, and I have done all kinds of things to practice that. But it's interesting. You either make decisions out of fear or out of service, that you say, or for love, right? Which is very, 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 very well put, I would say. Somebody who's thought about this for a long time. I would so
Yeah,
and I think and the way you talked about, like, you won't appreciate, I mean, the flowers when you smell them if you have not if you've not gone through some.
you've not been there in autumn and there's no
Yeah,
flowers.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I totally resonate with that sentiment a whole lot. So tell me, I feel like you're a very innovative person because of the background you've had. You've studied law, and then post that you've gone and worked as a consultant, and you've looked at technology for a long time. Founded Data Alchemist, and 11 years ago, when nobody talked about this as much
Mm,
as now people are talking about it, right?
mm, yeah,
Um, and then you've gone and you're working in an industry right now, which is first of all very hard to understand, and then trying to apply technology into it. So tell
mm.
me, like, how do you foster like innovation and creativity, like within any company that you work, build? How do you do that?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I've had maybe three modes in my life, and I'm busy with the third.
yeah,
So, version one was um, I have grown up with a lot of encouragement to try things, and
yeah,
consequences of failure always very low. So version one of myself was in being in awe of the world. And I don't think that's ever left. I think these are layers of innovation. But just being in awe. Like this computer, you can type on it and you can save a thing on a tape and it'll come back, and you can hack this game, and every time you die you get an extra life and all these things, and you're just in awe, right? And so
yeah,
that energy of being in awe of how cool things are, when you
yeah,
have powerful communication style, which I was gifted with, born into,
yeah,
um, people flock to that, and when people flock to it, ideas flourish. So I would say
yeah,
that was my version one. Version two was when I started building teams that I hired, that I looked for certain
yeah,
skills that complement me. I mean,
yeah,
like you mentioned a few times, that I also have a law background.
yeah,
Law has risk and opportunity. So I've always said that the opposite side of risk is opportunity. Understand
yeah,
risk so I can get opportunity. Some people only focus on the risk and they do nothing. And so you've got to like have the right attitude. So I could
yeah.
build teams, and I led those teams. I pushed them. I challenged them. We would sit
Mhm.
there late at night and really fire the cylinders on what can be done. I would
Yeah,
say that in the second version, there was a lot of the ideas that I started off with because I often had the most experience in the room, and then people would have sub ideas out of that.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
that worked for a while. And I'd say even at MaxMine, it's worked well. But at MaxMine, there's a lot of people a lot smarter than I am, and some of them with a lot more experience. And even in Data Alchemists, my co-founder, my brother-in-law, is a quant, and he used to do like some amazing things. Blows my mind. And I've had to get to the third version of innovation,
yeah,
and that's true co-creation.
yeah,
And the place I've seen co-creation the best is I watch my kids. The kids that are born that work in a digital environment, that can meet someone and not have any judgment about where they're from or what they studied. And, if they
yeah,
play a gun, only look at the data about their kill death ratio and all these things, and then bond with that person. Or when they do
yeah,
projects at school and genuinely co create, like
yeah,
let the idea organically get created. And so my latest version of innovation, the
Yeah.
one where I was in awe, the one where I was in awe and inspiring and making the team come up with more ways to like expand this idea and make it real. I'm now on
Yeah.
the idea where I'm a lot more listening. And this is new for
Yeah.
me too, learning how to listen better. But the
Yeah.
rewards have been incredible. There are things that I just couldn't imagine we could do. And this co-creation space is
Yeah.
extremely empowering for teams as well.
Yeah. That's interesting. So I can talk a lot. I've got a gift of gab like you as well, and I think if I'm sitting in a room, I'm the one who's talking the most, and I've realized that when you listen, actually you get smarter. And now sometimes I just sit in a room and people think like I'm having a bad day or something like that because I'm not talking. But I'm like, no, I'm not well, but you guys talk and I listen. So I
Yeah.
hear you when you say that. And something that was very interesting, you talked about losing your identity, right? And I feel like that's the podcast that I did where I was interviewed. So where I spoke about lose how important it is to lose your identity and becoming like a nobody. Because I feel like when we tie ourselves to a certain identity too strongly, we basically cannot reach our full potential that we need to reach. I mean, it could be personally and professionally as well.
Yeah.
So,
Your next growth opportunity may be the opposite of that identity. And if
yeah,
you're not open
exactly.
to see it.
Yeah, totally hear you. So, I think we have a lot. I have to say we have a lot in common. That's funny. But okay, so tell me, like you talked about building a team, and the
Mm,
day I learned to build a team, it was like aha moment for me, right? Because I was like, oh, this is how I can like delegate it. This is how I can do this kind of a thing. I was like super
mm,
excited about it. Um, so tell me what your leadership style has been, and how do you cultivate like a culture and people who, like you rightly pointed out, people who were smarter than you but they followed you.
mm,
Yeah,
mm. I think everyone needs to find their own niche in building a team. I think it's really important when you create a
yeah,
team to listen to yourself, listen to your gut,
yeah,
and um, that's the conscious mind, the one that we do all of our thinking with, and where we spend most of our day is like the size of a football field, and the
yeah,
subconscious is the size of a football field, and you got to be careful that you try and use the football to hold back the football field. So when it
yeah.
comes to hiring people, the ability to, and I think you specifically mean building a team, hiring them, or building a team that you have and
Like
empowering them.
leadership style. What would you say? How do you lead people
Oh, okay.
who are like like you rightly pointed out that people who are like much smarter than me. I was watching Oppenheimer very recently, and I watched it a little later than a lot of other people. But I felt like Oppenheimer was a leader. He was not a scientist, he was a leader, right?
He
And
was.
he was surrounded by scientists who are much, much smarter than him. I mean, I don't fully prescribe to his legacy, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
but yeah, so he was a great leader, and I feel like
Mm,
to build anything, one needs to have a great leadership skills. And as you rightly pointed out, you have a lot of people who are much smarter than you in your team, and they are
yeah.
following you. How do you build that?
Sure. Okay. So you're talking about, you're hinting at something that a lot of people call imposter syndrome,
Yeah,
as well, in a leadership position, and I think there's a lot written about that. So I won't touch on that. The way
yeah,
I lead is I watch for small signals in
hmm,
what people say and what they do, and
hmm,
so I don't like the big PowerPoint things. So I have a style, a leadership style that's we'll have formality, we'll have meetings, we'll have presentations.
yeah,
But I, especially at MaxMine, put a mandate on myself, which was you will have X% of blank diary time. So my
yeah,
diary is never full. And that time
yeah,
is used to walk around the team, sit down, ask them how they're going. I do
yeah,
lots of lunches. The offices in Adelaide and some of the offices in South Africa. I do
yeah,
lots of lunch, lots of breakfast, lots of walks and talks, and I
yeah,
listen.
yeah,
And what you learn from those conversations is, as a CEO, I've recently become exec advisor, but as a CEO, you look down at this organization and you run a system of system simulation of what everyone's doing. And I use
Yeah.
that feedback to like adjust my model of the reality. In that,
Hmm.
I'm looking for signals of people that see things that are unusual, that care about things that are unusual. And so what I tend to do is I have the job of removing cultural non-fit. And if I look at one of my strengths, it has been to have difficult conversations early on,
Yeah.
um, move people along that don't fit. I also help them find their next job in most cases because I'm like, look, it looks like you're unhappy and I think it's going to become unhappier. How about we
Yeah.
do something for you? And if you have a visa issue, we'll look after you.
Yeah.
So the first thing is in terms of building that culture where people follow you. So if you're willing to have the hard conversations or
Yeah.
make the changes so the team feels protected, it does
Hmm.
something pretty amazing. The second thing is I have often promoted people that are technical and
Yeah.
often don't want to be leaders. I think there's a
Yeah.
very famous Steve Jobs quote where he says he hired all these consultants and mid-level managers and it was a disaster. And then he started promoting people who didn't want to be leaders but realized if they don't step into that space, no one
Yeah.
will. The other person will probably screw it up. So they're going to be the leader.
Oh, I
Those
love
are
that. Actually, that's smart. That is very smart, actually. Yeah, I love that.
the last part is something that I had to learn. I have a friend, a very good friend. She's a mentor to me. And she was
Yeah.
quite junior at Deloitte, but she eventually became partner. Dual Olympian. She was the captain of the Hockeyroos, who hit a winning goal in Sydney in front
Yeah.
of all of the home crowd for Olympics. And she started a career again, talk about ego death and as a consultant. And she was promoted, but not a partner yet. And I became a very young partner, and she came to talk to me. And I was not sitting in my office, and I'm like, no, I don't want to be in the office. I want to be
Yeah.
with my team. And she said, Kurt, it's not about you, you selfish dude. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I want to be with my team. This is where if I'm in the office, I'm in the glass box. And she said,
Yeah.
no, it's not for you. When
Yeah.
you walk into that glass box,
Yeah.
you can still come here and talk to them. But when you walk in there, all of this team put their social capital in you.
Yeah.
And when you get promoted and you walk into that office and you take this pedestal of power
Yeah.
and greatness and whatever, they go with you. You need
Yeah.
to show them that their trust in you is rewarded. And it wasn't about having an ego, but up until that
Yes.
point, being a young person, I didn't realize how important my profile, my
Yeah.
stage presence, my performance when I stand up in front of a crowd, how they want to be proud of their leader. And so the
Yeah.
single thing you could do for your team
Yeah.
is honor the pride that they have in you.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So tell me, if you've had like any book or a mentor that has significantly influenced you, and I feel like you're almost very spiritual also in some ways. So I'm just curious, if anything that deeply influenced you and changed your course of direction. And you talked about your teacher.
Yeah, well, I have a few books that are lying here that I'm currently like I read them all concurrently. So like when I was 13 when I read Seven Habits of Highly Effective People and Be Proactive and Start with the End in Mind and all these kind of key habits. But the book that I
Yeah,
currently am reading really just blew my mind, and
yeah,
I'm happy to share one. It's so Joe Polish, like shoe polish, Joe Joe Polish, runs the
yeah.
Genius Network, one of the best marketers in the world, and the Genius
Uh-huh.
Network is bring best people together. He
Yeah,
brought out a book called "What's in It for Them." Not what's in
yeah,
it for me, but what's in it for them. And he
yeah,
introduced me to this concept that has become the fundamental thing I'm shaping my life on.
yeah,
It's like you said sometimes someone, earlier in our conversation, you said someone can just say one thing and that
yeah,
changes. So
yeah,
this one thing is accumulation of my thinking and all of the various journeys of self-discovery and reinvention I've gone in. And
yeah,
he introduces the concept of elf and half.
yeah,
And it's an energy concept. And so he says he wants to spend all of his time with the elf people. I've adopted that wholeheartedly. If you look at my LinkedIn post, they all talk about elf. So elf stands for when you and I are spending time together. And I would say this moment feels like this. Not a comment about you as a person. You are who you are. I'm who I am. But the space between us, does it have
yeah,
energy that's generative, right? So easy, lucrative, and fun. That's
Yeah.
Elf. You're easy to
Yeah.
talk to. I'm learning
Yeah.
from you, our
Yeah.
pre-discussion and what we, and this is, I feel like it's, I'm having fun here. So people that
Yeah.
are Elf are generally generate
Mm.
energy. The opposite of that is the space between us is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. These
Yeah.
are, when you have agreed something, but the terms and conditions keeps getting thrown in your face. Someone who
Yeah.
likes to roll in the details that you don't care about, or
Yeah.
something details really important and they don't want to look at the detail because they just want to run on. Whatever that
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
how much of your time goes into that? And it's only recently where I realized I don't have to spend time with half people.
Mm. Yeah.
Sometimes you can't avoid a half conversation, so you plan for it. But
Yeah.
once you realize that you can net positive your energy, I have about 10 times, one order of magnitude more energy per week based on the
Yeah.
people I hang out with. And so that elf and a half concept from that book, it accumulates in
Yeah.
this thing that you are who
Yeah.
you hang out with.
Yes, you are who you hang out with. And I had to do this in the last 1 year as well. And I didn't do it in a very nice concept. And thank you for teaching me this. I'll probably go and read this book when I have some time. And like you, I read 4 books like interchangeably in a day as well, because it makes me think differently. So like it's important that people who are around you, they give you high energy. If they don't give you high energy, it's important to uh,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, at work, you cannot always do that. You have to put up
I can
your.
challenge you. Well, think about that for a second. So,
Yeah,
like, I think high energy is people who challenge you, people who make you think, people who can tell you what the hell are you doing. They could all be elf,
yeah,
because it's done in love. The
yeah,
people
yeah,
at work, I think you have to challenge your own thoughts there because you can.
yeah,
They have a boss, they have a junior,
yeah,
they have a year that
yeah.
you can decline a meeting and push it to. So all my half meetings are on Fridays. So, so
I
I'm saying
wonder
that,
if everybody will look at your calendar.
yeah, if your boss is a half, then find something
Yeah,
else. Uh,
yeah, yeah. I totally hear you. So okay, so tell me, what is the most critical skill and advice that you would give to somebody who's trying to start their career slash, be an entrepreneur, you've worn like many hats. So, what would be that one advice or skills that you look at in people? When you look at
mm,
somebody younger now.
what has worked for me and won't work for everyone else, but the thing that has always worked for me is just being in awe of things. I'm in
Yeah,
awe of people. I love your energy. And now you took on Yahoo to get your Makers Bar brand. That sounds amazing. And I
yeah,
think there are kinds of people that can find amazingness in the desert because they see a small flower and they go, how did this flower grow here? They can be in a
yeah,
jungle and they can see something that's entirely quiet in all of this noise and be in awe of that. And so I
yeah,
think that's the thing that's always worked for me, in awe of what's happening with technology and also
yeah,
being in awe of people. You know,
yeah,
if
yeah,
if that works for you and it's not for everyone, that
yeah,
inspires other people. When you're in awe of them, they go, "What are you seeing? Like, I'm now interested in you because you see, like, and that
yeah,
builds relationships. When I'm in
yeah,
awe of a product or something that you've built and you want to learn more, it teaches you things. That's
yeah.
been my show.
Yeah, but also I think from at a young age, being in awe of someone can actually even flare insecurities as well, right? So I think you don't have insecurities from a very young age. You probably appreciate what he or she brings into the table, and I think
Yeah.
that is a distinction there. Yeah, and you,
I think the
because,
difference between being in awe
yeah,
or being a fan is two different
yeah,
things. I'm not a big cult person, and I certainly don't follow political
yeah,
parties,
yeah, yeah.
black and
So
white.
like for
So that,
me, yeah. So if somebody buys a massive home or something like that, something material thing that I don't have, or built a company which is better than mine, I look at it, I analyze it, I process it, and I'm like, okay, this is how this person did it. And okay, let me figure out how to learn this. And that's being in awe of that person and learning
yes,
that. But
of course.
somebody else might not process it in a very similar fashion and they would be like complaining and
Well, that's their journey. I
yeah,
think everyone's got their own journey, and
yeah,
they if they're open to learning. I mean, everyone knows that if you do things for money, it often leads
Yeah.
to harder. Money
Yes.
follows the
Yeah.
vibes. I
Yeah.
mean, a good example is my wife's a nanochemist, and I'm in awe of the cancer work that she does. So she does first in human cancer trials, and
Yeah.
she's the last carry between someone who's been given 6 months to live and having a
Yeah.
chance. And got pretty good
Yeah.
results. And I'm in awe of like how you can make
Yeah.
that happen and give
Yeah.
someone all this purpose. And she goes, "Oh, but I just do all the paperwork." I'm like, "Well, no, you're giving people a second chance." And that all comes with the ability to reframe things. And maybe I should add that. So
Yeah.
a house, buying an expensive house doesn't reframe very well. But building a
Yeah.
company from scratch or overcoming adversity, like you said, that I can be in
Yeah.
awe of.
Yeah. Totally hear you. All right, Kurt, it was nice meeting you, and I really, really enjoyed our conversation. And thank you for coming on Maker's Bar.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun talking to you, Akshata.
Yeah, likewise.
Out there.